Hi and welcome to Teach the Table. I'm Nathan and this is Bohnanza. Bohnanza is a card game where we're trying to grow beans in our bean fields and trade them with other people. This deck is made up of 11 different types of beans. It may be less depending on the number of players, and what you're trying to do is grow the beans in your bean fields. Each player has 2 imaginary bean fields where they can place beans of the same type in each field. You cannot mix 2 different types of beans in one field. The card will tell you the type of bean, how many of those there are in the deck, and how many of them you need to harvest in order to get 1, 2, 3, or 4 coins. Notice that beans that are more rare, you need less of them in order to get more coins. Throughout the entire game, you can never change the order of the cards in your hand, so new cards that you get are going to go in the back of your hand, and cards that you're playing have to come from the front of your hand, unless you're going to trade cards to other people. If you decide to give some away, let's say that I didn't really want this card, I could find someone who wants it and maybe they can give me something that I want in return. So there's a lot of trading that goes on in this game. Once there's cards in both of your fields, you can't plant another card from your hand unless it matches one of those 2 types of cards. The only way that you could plant that card is to harvest one of these fields. To harvest them, you just count how many there are and you get the appropriate number of coins. In this case, there's 4 cards and I need 3 cards to get 1 coin. So this is all worth 1 coin. I take one of them and the reverse side has coins on it, the rest go into a discard pile. Note that you can never harvest a field that only has 1 card unless both the fields only had 1 card. In that case, you could just choose one and discard it because it's not worth anything to plant your next card. You can harvest your fields at any time, even if it's not on your turn. The goal of the game is to be the player with the most coins set aside at the end of the game, and the game ends once this deck has been gone through 3 times. There's also a card that you can get an additional 3rd bean field. This will cost you 3 coins. You can buy it whenever you have enough coins, and that'll give you your 3rd permanent bean field in addition to your 2 that you started with. You can never have more than this 3. Starting with the active player, players take turns clockwise around the table, and on a player's turn, the first thing they have to do is plant the card in front of their hand. If they like, they may also plant the 2nd card in their hand, but they don't have to. Next is a trading phase with the active player, so 2 cards come off the top of the deck, and the active player has to decide whether they want to plant those or try to trade them off to other people, hopefully in exchange for something that they do want. In my case, I don't have either of these in my fields, so if I was to plant these, I'd have to get rid of my fields entirely. So what I might try to do is see if anyone else has chili beans or wax beans coming up in the front of their hands that they'd like to plant in their fields. Anything that people take during this step, they will have to plant immediately. But again, people can also trade you cards, or you could trade cards with other people from the middle of your hand, not necessarily from the front every time. So in my case, I might ask if any players want to give me a red bean or a green bean in exchange for a chili or a wax bean. Again, players can give me cards even if they're not taking anything. All the trading has to go with the active player though. So this player and this player could not just trade with each other. The trades would have to go through the person whose active turn it is. If you can't find people that want to trade with you, you can also just donate these to other people, but again, they have to accept that donation. You can't just say someone has to take it. So if you can't find one who can give these a good home, then you're going to have to get rid of your stuff and plant them immediately. Once all the cards have been traded or donated, the players who receive them have to plant them. So even if it's not your turn, if you took cards from someone else, you'd have to plant them in your fields right now. The last step of a player's turn is simply drawing 3 more cards. And again, remember those cards have to go in the back of their hand. So do them one at a time into the back of the hand. That ends the player's turn and it goes to the next player clockwise. Once this deck is exhausted, then you're going to shuffle the discard pile to form a new deck. The game is going to end once this deck has been exhausted for the 3rd time. This deck will get smaller and smaller each time this is exhausted because people are harvesting their fields and taking off some of them as coins for points. At the end of the game, players set aside their hand and do one last harvesting of all of their cards. So this is worth 1 point, this is worth 1 point, and this is worth 0 points. Total up the number of coins that you have, and whoever has the most coins is the winner. One last thing to note is that there's a little bit different rules depending on the number of players. The game can be played with 2 to 7 people. If you're playing with 2 players, I recommend just reading the rules for 2 players because it's played quite a bit differently. If you're playing with 3 players, you're not going to have any cocoa beans in the game, and each player will start with their 3rd bean field already. So everyone will always just have 3 bean fields, and the game will end once the draw deck has been exhausted for the 2nd time instead of the 3rd time. With 4 or 5 players, you're going to remove the coffee beans from the game, and with 6 or 7 players, you remove the garden beans beans and the cocoa beans, as well as the third bean field is going to cost you 2 coins instead of 3, and at the end of your turn, instead of drawing 3 cards into your hand, you draw 4 cards into your hand. So just make sure everyone knows, based on the number of players, those slight rule variations before you go into your game. And that's how you play Bohnanza. Thanks for watching Teach the Table. If you like these videos, please subscribe to my channel and I'll see you next time. As always, don't forget to have fun.